Now, let's shift gears a bit and dive into another crucial aspect of basic intercultural competency, and that is understanding and recognizing biases. So, what is bias? The definition of bias is an unsupported judgment, an automatic association in our brain that demonstrates underlying attitudes in favor or against other people. It happens outside our conscious awareness and affects how we relate to and react to others. In other words, we all have biases. We all have biases, but most of the time we are not aware of them. Biases are preconceived notions or attitudes that we hold, often without even realizing it. These biases can influence our thoughts, behaviors, and decisions in subtle but significant ways. It's important to recognize that everyone has biases. Everyone, including myself, you, and everyone that you know. But being aware of them is the first step towards minimizing their impact. All right, let's talk about type of biases. There are several types of biases that can affect our interactions. Here are a couple of key examples. First one, unconscious bias, also known as implicit bias. This occurs when we have attitudes towards people or associate stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. For example, you might unconsciously favor people who share similar backgrounds or experiences to your own. Then, confirmation bias. This is the tendency to search for, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. For instance, if you believe a certain stereotype about a group of people, you might pay more attention to information that supports this belief and ignore evidence that contradicts it. Now that we explore what biases are and the different types of biases we might hold, let's take a closer look at these biases, particularly racial biases impact individuals. These impacts highlight why it's so important to address and challenge our own biases to build an equitable and more inclusive society. So let's start with racial profiling. So biases can lead to unjust profiling and targeting individuals based on their race, ethnic, or ethnicity. This means people of color might be unfairly singled out by law enforcement or other authorities simply because of their appearances. This kind of profiling is not only unfair but also damages trust between communities and institutions. Then there's discrimination. Biases often result in discriminatory practices, especially in areas like hiring, promotions, and workplace dynamics. People of color might face unfair treatment when applying for jobs, trying to get promoted, or navigating their daily work environment. Discrimination like this can limit opportunities and create a hostile work atmosphere. Then we have health disparities. Racial biases in healthcare can lead to unequal treatment and poorer health outcomes for people of color. They might not receive the same quality of care as others, leading to higher rates of chronic diseases and lower life expectancy. Addressing these biases in healthcare is very important for ensuring everyone has equitable access to quality medical health care. Last but not least, mental health. Experiencing racial bias can take a serious toll on mental health. It can lead to psychological issues like anxiety, depression, and decreases sense of self-worth. The constant stress and trauma of facing racism can affect mental well-being and overall quality of life. Now that we discussed what biases are and how they affect individuals, let's take a look at how biases, particularly the racial biases that we're talking about, impact society as a whole. These impacts highlight why it's so important to address and challenge our biases to create an equitable and more inclusive community for everyone. So the first one on the list is systemic racism. Biases are often embedded in the societal structures, leading to unequal opportunities and outcomes in education, employment, and the criminal justice system. This means that people of color can face systematic barriers that limit their chances for success and perpetuate cycles of disadvantage. These biases in the system can result in fewer educational opportunities, higher unemployment rates, and disproportionate incarceration rates for marginalized groups. Then there's a social inequality. Biases contribute to socioeconomic disparities that marginalize communities of color and perpetuate poverty. Discriminatory practices in housing, employment, and education create a maintained economic gaps between different racial groups. This inequality traps many people in a cycle of poverty, making it difficult for them to improve their socioeconomic status and access better opportunities. Cultural division. Biases foster divisions and tensions between different racial and ethnic groups, leading to social unrest and fragmentation. When biases go unchallenged, they can create an us versus them mentality, us versus them mentality that divides communities. This division can result in more conflicts that we already experienced, correct? More protests and general sense of instability, weakening the social fabric of society. Economic inefficiency. Racism and biases result in the underutilization of talent and potential, affecting the overall productivity and economic growth of society. When people are excluded or marginalized due to their race, their talents and skills are not fully utilized. This not only limits their personal growth but also reduces their overall economic output and innovation potential of the entire society. How biases affect intercultural interaction. Now let's discuss how these biases impact our intercultural interactions. Biases can shape our perceptions and behaviors in various ways. Number one, communication. Unconscious biases can affect how we communicate with others. We might interrupt or talk over someone we have a bias against, or we may not listen as all attentively to their ideas and perspectives. Decision making. Biases can influence our decision in areas like hiring, promotions, and everyday choices. For example, a manager with an unconscious bias might favor candidates from certain backgrounds over others, even if the latter are equally qualified. Biases can affect the quality of our relationships. They can create misunderstandings and conflicts, making it harder to build trust and mutual respect. Personal reflection exercise we'll do here. To understand and address our biases, we can engage in personal reflection exercise. Here are a few activities for you all to consider. Journaling, we've been doing a few activities on by journaling, by jotting down our thoughts and stuff. So take some time to reflect on your interactions and decisions. Write down instances where you might have acted on a bias and consider how you could approach similar situation differently in the future. If you're alone watching this training, jot it down. If you're watching this as a group or with someone else, feel free to share if you're comfortable. And there's also bias tests. There are various online. You can type on Google bias test, and that can help you identify your unconscious biases. These tests can be an eye-opening experience and provide a starting point for addressing your biases. Diverse interactions. Make an effort to interact with people from diverse backgrounds. By exposing yourself to different perspectives and experiences, you can challenge your own biases and broaden your understanding. Understanding and recognizing biases is a very important step towards fostering intercultural competency. By being aware of our biases and actively working to address them, we can create more inclusive and equitable environments. Let's take these insights forward as we continue our journey towards greater intercultural understanding. Now that we've explored the impacts of racism and discussed some key anti-racism strategies and practices, let's take a moment to reflect on how all of these ties into the concept of intercultural competency. So, first let's revisit the civil rights movement. The civil rights movements of the 1950s and 1960s was a pivotal era in American history. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks led efforts to end racial segregation and discrimination. Through nonviolent protests, legal challenges, and grassroots organizing, they fought for equality and justice. These actions laid the groundwork for future anti-racism initiatives and are a powerful example of how collective action can bring about significant social change. Next, we have Robin DiAngelo. Robin DiAngelo's works on white fragility is a crucial tool for understanding and addressing our own biases. Her book encourages self-reflection and honest conversations about race. This kind of reflection is essential for recognizing our biases and working to overcome them, which is a key aspect of intercultural competency. Moving on to Ibram X. Kendi. Ibram X. Kendi book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, challenges us to go beyond just avoiding racism and to actively work against it. Kendi's practical advice on identifying and challenging racist ideas in our daily lives provides a roadmap for creating a more just society. This proactive approach aligns perfectly with the principle of intercultural competency, which emphasizes continuous learning and actively engagement in promoting equity. Finally, let's talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. The Black Lives Matter movement highlights the ongoing struggle against systematic racism and police brutality. By advocating for justice and equality, Black Lives Matter encourages us to listen, learn, and act in solidarity with marginalized communities. Supporting and understanding the aims of Black Lives Matter enhances our intercultural competency by recognizing the importance of equity and justice for all cultural groups. So, understanding these anti-racism strategies and practices is crucial for fostering an inclusive society. But how do we tie this all together into our daily interactions? That's where intercultural competency comes in. Intercultural competency involves recognizing and valuing diverse perspectives, challenging our biases, and taking action to support equity and justice. It's about understanding how our own cultural background and experiences shape our perceptions and interactions, and how can we bridge differences to create more inclusive and respectful environments. On the next slide, we'll dive deeper into what intercultural competency is and how we can develop these skills to better navigate our diverse world. By integrating anti-racism strategies into our practice of intercultural competency, we can work together to dismantle racism and build a community where everyone is respected and valued.